Darkness and light. Two opposing forces that are simultaneously dependent on one another. Without light, there can be no darkness, and without darkness, there can be no light. These concepts are often used in accordance with some sort of conflict. Good versus evil, purity versus corruption, hope versus despair. They represent a fundamental contrast in ideals that cannot exist in the same space, and as such, they are destined to collide. Yet there will always be a space between those extremes. Ironically, the core of the black and white dichotomy isn't division, but unity. It's about reconciling the light and dark aspects of life and reaching an ideal compromise. Because regardless of how people present themselves, everyone has a bit of both inside them. Everyone has their own individual perspective that informs their actions. And because of that, the idea of a light and dark relationship is inherently multifaceted. The goal of any connection, be it platonic or romantic, is for each half to support and motivate the other, compensating for weaknesses and accentuating strengths. One character's trauma may act as the basis for comparison, but that doesn't make their partner a being of pure light. Failing to recognize that could be disastrous, as placing another person on a pedestal can leave their insecurities uncared for, their bad habits unchecked. Mutual trust often brings people together and lowers their defenses, which is why when a companion does something hurtful, even if accidentally, it cuts deep. The power of friendship shines radiantly in most circumstances. It is a beacon of encouragement that promotes empathy and personal growth. But, like all things, it too can possess dark qualities. Hunter x Hunter is structured in such a way that splits the four main characters into two distinct pairings, both of which have beneficial yet toxic side effects on the individuals involved. Gon is introduced as the Sunshine Child, who inspires a lowly shadow like Killua to change. His honest and open nature enables him to accept the young assassin without prejudice, and he even goes out of his way to bring Killua back from the Zoldyck Mansion after Killua had been coerced into doubting the strength of their bond. From there, Gon becomes the savior of light that Killua depends on as he continuously devalues his own importance. Gon may be reckless and stupid, but with Killua there to clean up or sometimes even prevent the mess altogether, they make a perfect team. Ambition and intellect, curiosity and caution, a brilliant balance of youthful potential, but only so long as the light burned brightly. For if Killua could not escape his own darkness, and if he could only get by off the radiance of others, he would never be someone else's guiding light. Gon can be a stubbornly loyal brat, but to flip that coin, he can also be incredibly selfish and ignorant to Killua's feelings. The dodgeball game is a case where Killua's dedication to Gon both physically harms himself and validates Gon's selfishness. But as this was a product of Gon's ambition, at least he would benefit. When these conditions repeat during the palace invasion, however, it's not a result of ambition, but of hatred. You have it easy. You can be perfectly calm. Kite's death means nothing to you. Gon's inability to cope with his own darkness leads him to lash out at Killua in his rage, and unlike before, no one benefits from this interaction. Gon chases vengeance and nearly gets himself killed. Killua's sacrifices for Gon amount to nothing when it matters most. The strict divide of light and dark crumbles. At the end of the election arc, Killua accepted Gon's gratitude, where he had previously told Palmony Kalgo friends shouldn't thank other friends. This demonstrates that he had grown to question his image of Gon as infallible brightness and recognize the faults he possessed. While Killua didn't consider himself worthy of Gon in the past because of this illusion, he did in that moment. Similarly, Gon's gratitude serves as an apology for his own misconceptions. Killua was not an empty void Gon could transfer his problems to, and Gon had taken their relationship for granted. It's one thing to rely on a friend for help with something Gon himself wasn't capable of, but he went too far. If it wasn't for Killua, and this is a truth he's shown to understand in his conversation with Kite, Gon would be dead. But that's what makes them even. Killua owes his life to Gon for pulling him out of his darkness. Gon owes Killua his own life after being pulled out of his darkness. So while yes, their friendship had a toxic undercurrent to it, it was also mutually beneficial, and by the end of the anime, that negative dynamic is almost completely resolved. Maybe not entirely, as Gon's Nen reset could be representative of his need to improve on his own, but he's also not in a position where Killua feels obligated to protect him, like in the Chimera Ant arc. If the bonds between peers are what guide them towards self-actualization, it could be argued that Gon and Killua's dynamic has reached its apex, or at least something close to it. Killua is able to roam free with Alluka, no longer directionless, while Gon must find a new path to follow now that he's found Jing. They don't need to be in the same space depending on each other at all times to know that they'll always be friends. And when these boys do eventually reunite, they'll likely use the insight they've gained to amplify each other's strengths more than ever. And when they do, that's when they'll truly reach their peak. Leorio and Kurapika have a similar but still distinct dynamic. In a way, Leorio is to Kurapika what Killua is to Gon, though the context is different. Leorio isn't smart enough or strong enough to totally stop or clean up a mess that Kurapika creates, but he acts as a support beam nevertheless. His gullible foolishness is contrasted by Kurapika's stern skepticism, yet it's his kind heart that keeps him stubbornly reaching out to the solitary chain user. Kurapika generally isn't as dumb or childish as Gon, but he still gets in over his head and overexerts himself at times. Not only that, but he's very aware of his own darkness, going so far as to cut people off to avoid dragging them down with him. This is what makes Leorio, the man who wants to become a doctor and thus lives to sacrifice himself, the perfect foil to our beautiful blonde bastard. While Kurapika can provide Leorio with the power that he lacks, something which really only benefited him in the Hunter exam so far, Leorio can provide Kurapika with the stability that his dangerous and chaotic lifestyle lacks. This is evidenced by his role during and after Yorknew, where he was the one taking care of Kurapika when the latter's adrenaline shut down and he inevitably crashed. In saying that though, they are far less dependent on each other compared to Gon and Killua, and with Melody around to serve a similar purpose, it's not as if Leorio has to carry everything on his shoulders. One might call their relationship more mature in that regard, as they're both older and possess more worldly knowledge than the young boys, but that might be giving them too much credit. While Killua is ultimately stronger and more capable than Gon, the gap in their power gradually seemed to decrease as the series went along. Meanwhile, the gap between Kurapika and Leorio's abilities is tremendous, so there's only so much that Leorio can do. For as much as Gon might have insulted Killua at his lowest point, he at least showed remorse for his attitude. Kurapika hasn't been as extreme, yet, but he's still trapped in his own world. Killua does get rewarded for his efforts in the end, but what about Leorio? Even in the Succession arc, he brought Kurapika into the Zodiacs and made it easier for him to pursue the Scarlet Eyes. Leorio has given so much of himself for Kurapika's benefit, but most of what Kurapika has done since the exam is indulge in his own ambitions. He made the Dark Continent ordeal a bit less awkward for Leorio, briefly, and then he left again. He might say that he's grateful, but considering his pattern of behavior, he hasn't done much to show it. And in that sense, their relationship might be even more toxic than Gon and Killua's. If anyone deserves better, it would be Leorio, right? Of course, I'm talking about two characters whose arcs aren't complete yet, so this predicament will resolve itself eventually, much like Gon and Killua's did. Lessons will be learned, and a happy ending will be achieved. Or Togashi will scar us all and kill everyone! None of this is to say that Hunter x Hunter doesn't still abide by a more typical power of friendship mindset. Jing's whole message at the end of the anime is about remembering to appreciate the friends we made along the way. So I'm not going to pretend that the series deconstructs this theme that is so integral to Shonen Jump narratives. The climax of Yorknew is a perfect example of real human connection being more valuable than the things we desire, and it's one of my favorite plot developments in anime. To quote the great scholar of our time, Hiro Mashima, "The power of friendship isn't as lame as you think." For all the problematic or cynical ideas a work could boil down to, what's wrong with being optimistic? Imbuing one's work with a concept that simple doesn't make it uninspired, it doesn't negate any other topics we might consider deep. Like any other trope or cliche, it's as impactful as its execution, and I generally find myself gravitating towards action-adventure titles because they're so adept at handling it. Where Hunter x Hunter happens to excel is in crafting relations where unity isn't solely positive and doesn't solely lead to power, which I find fascinating. There are no beings of light or darkness in an equal partnership, and any bonds rooted in such a framework will inevitably fail to maintain that unhealthy standard. I call it toxic like that's unique, but all camaraderie can have harmful undercurrents to it. Relationships can be messy. They might start from an unhealthy place of overprotection or overdependence. Maybe certain ideologies don't line up. Sometimes bonds just break down over time. People are complicated, and I enjoy seeing those minor differences explored in ways that result in improvement, or juxtapose a lack of progress against something more hopeful. If there is any vibrance in a relationship, it's something that both parties must create together. And if darkness exists, it must likewise be confronted together. Only then can we improve upon our failures and move forward. Want to see this concept explored in another work of fiction? Check out Bloom Into You, a love story that uses that premise to recontextualize what it means to fall in love with someone. It's cute and wholesome, and one of my favorite things ever, plus there's even an interview with the author and editor of the manga that references Hunter x Hunter as the kind of light and dark relationship they were looking to depict. So you should read it, and watch the anime, and watch my video. Thank you for joining me for Togashi Month. I'm sorry that I didn't have any more Yu Yu Hakusho specific ideas or Level E specific ideas. It kind of just ended up being a month of videos on Hunter x Hunter specifically, so I apologize for that little bit of false advertising. But it's not as if the end of Togashi Month means that I'm going to stop talking about Togashi. There will be more videos at some point. I don't know what ideas there'll be. The important thing to take away from this month was not the videos I made or the videos I didn't make. It wasn't about the themes I discussed or the messages. It was all about the friends we made along the way. And I've made some pretty strong connections during my time on YouTube, and I'm hoping that I'll continue to make more as I keep doing this. So stay tuned for more videos. Support me on Patreon if you want to see more projects like this, more endeavors like this. Hopefully now that I've made a month of 6 videos, I'll be able to get back to a more normal schedule. But, you know, the journey continues, and we're going to appreciate the detours along the way. So, I'll see you next time.